Hey, I'm Bob at ILikeToMakeStuff. Today we're going to make a DIY Steadicam. So the problem we're trying to solve with this is that when you hold a camera with your hand, it bounces around a whole lot based on your steps and the movement of your arm and all that stuff. Steadicam is a brand of stabilization rig that they use in movies, and they're really expensive and really complicated. We're going to do a super simple, cheap version. So let's check it out. I started with 3 pieces of 3/4 inch pipe, a flange, 2 ends, and a T-connector. Also some bolts and nuts and PVC. Now really you just screw these together. There's no construction here, but essentially you want to end up with a T. I put the flange on the bottom and it'll be used to hold the weight later. The caps go on both ends, but before I put the cap on the top, I wanted to drill a hole in it. I took a tip from Jimmy DiResta about how to use a circular object like this on the drill press. You use a clamp to hold it down, and that makes it a lot easier to drill through. Be sure to do this slowly if you do it. Once that hole was there, I could run a bolt through and tighten it down with a nut, and then add another nut to the top and leave it loose. I added that cap to the end of it, and that was pretty much it. Now the way this works is you hold right below the T, and then you can use the arm for panning. It works pretty well, but there's a lot of friction between your skin and the metal pipe, so I decided to make that smoother. I cut some 1-inch PVC down to about the size of my fist. Then I cut it in half, and then cut each of those pieces in half again. You only need 3 of these 4 quarters. A sanding block gets rid of these burrs very quickly and very easily. But since I was taking one of these out, I wanted to change the angle so that they would fit together better. I used a belt sander to smooth down the angle on both sides of all 3 pieces. It ends up kind of looking like this. With those angles gone, they fit around the pipe a lot better than I expected them to, and now I just had to figure out how to attach them. Since this is a pretty DIY project, I didn't mind using duct tape. I laid out 3 pieces and overlapped them just a little bit. Here's a tip: if you lick the tip of your finger, it won't stick to duct tape. I laid out the pipe pieces right in the center and made sure to connect the outer edges as I was laying them in place. Used a knife to cut off the extra tape on the top and bottom. And I cut off the strip on one side. With it wrapped around the pipe, I was able to attach the tape and make a nice little sleeve to go around the pipe. It actually worked really, really well. If you wanted, you could even add some lubricant on the inside of this to make it even smoother, but it seemed to work great for me. Then I just screwed everything back together so I could see how well it worked. Now you'll notice here that by holding the sleeve, it rotates a lot easier than it did before. If you need it to not rotate this much, all you have to do is squeeze the sleeve. Now the sleeve also makes it easy to take the camera up and down in a smooth motion. The last thing was to take it all apart, take off any parts that were going to be threaded, and then I wanted to paint it just so it didn't look quite so DIY. I used some matte black paint, which I thought turned out pretty cool. Now the cool thing about having the flange at the bottom is you can put anything on there to hold the weight that you need. In this case, I screwed on a piece of wood, which I could use to clamp to anything. I had a brick laying around, so I figured I'd start with that. I screwed my camera onto the top and then tightened up the nut to the camera to hold it in place. Alright, so it's all done. Let's take it outside and do some tests, and we'll see how much of a difference it actually makes. With a slow walk, you can tell a little bit of a difference. Now I did have to slow down the handheld footage just to match the timing, just a little bit, but basically they look about the same. The handheld is a little bit more jumpy, but it's not too bad. With a fast walk, I actually think it's less noticeable. They're both a little bit jumpy, but not too terrible. The biggest difference is when you're really running and your body is bouncing up and down. On this light run, the one on the left is just way bouncier. The one on the right looks a little bit more like a speeder bike chase from Star Wars to me. Now those tests that you saw were actually shot with this camera, with the DSLR that I shoot everything with. I also did some tests with the GoPro just to see if there was any difference. Since this has a much wider angle lens, I wanted to see if there was any obvious difference. If you want to see the test footage from this, just click right here or the link down in the description. You can see that. It's nothing special, it's just another test. So from those tests, I hope that you can see that it definitely helps the footage. It's not gonna fix everything. You're still gonna have to be conscious of how you move this around, but it definitely helps smooth out some of the motion. Now, depending on what you put up top, the camera, the microphone, lights, whatever it is you mount up here, you have to counterweight at the bottom. You want these to be at least even, if not bottom heavy. That's gonna make a huge difference in how well this works. There's also some practice involved about how tightly you grip this and how you move this. It just takes a little bit of practice to understand how the motion translates to what you see. Now, the other thing to consider is that the more weight you put on this thing, the more you have to hold. You're holding this thing with your arm, unlike a real Steadicam, which is mounted to a harness on your body. So if this thing gets pretty heavy, you're not gonna be able to use it for very long, but depending on what you're doing, this might be a good solution. Now, there are a lot of variations on this project, and if you've made one of these and you have some suggestions or you just comments in general, leave those down below or at ILikeToMakeStuff.com. I love to hear that stuff, and it always helps everybody else who's watching these videos. I have a lot more projects for you to check out, a Making It podcast, and now my show Brain Pick is an audio-only podcast. The first episode of that is with Ben Ueda from Homemade Modern. It's right there. It's a really good one. You're going to want to check it out. This is what I do for a living now, and I'm so excited about that. If you want to help support this and help me do more of these, Patreon is the best way to do that. Check me out on social networks. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.